All right, so this is the first video for Simple Medicine. We're going to talk about vaccines. All right, we've heard a lot about vaccines in the media and online and Facebook and everything else, but I think it's important to first understand, what are vaccines? Why do they work? Why do you hear so much about them? What's the point of vaccines? But in order to really understand how vaccines work, we first need to understand how the human body works. And specifically, we need to understand how the immune system works, right? When you think immune system, I'm sure you're all thinking vitamin C, right? Thinking drinking water and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's all very true, and that works with your immune system, because ultimately the immune system is designed to keep your body healthy, right? Nobody likes the flu, or nobody likes having a cold, nobody likes feeling sick or anything like that. So the immune system is the most important system that we have in our body to keep us feeling well, right? So how do we do this? How so many other bacteria and viruses and everything else coming on in the world that we're exposed to? How do we stay healthy through all of this? Well, we do it through a bunch of different things, but the thing I'm going to focus on today specifically is something called antibodies. What are antibodies? It's very simple. Antibodies are a protein, right? We have proteins that everyone knows about in our muscles and everything else, but we also have proteins floating around in our body, in our blood vessels, and even in different tissues and all that. And these proteins are very important for a bunch of different reasons. So when you hear protein, don't just think huge bodybuilders, but think of little molecules that have specialized things to do and specialized work for that specific area, for whatever it is they may do, okay? So I'm going to talk about antibodies. Why antibodies? Because eventually we're going to talk about vaccines, and vaccines are basically antibodies, right? So that's why this is all coming into play. Okay, what is an antibody? It's this, just this simple. What is this? It looks like a Y. You're exactly right. It is a Y. And it's a Y because that's how it looks like in the body, right? As you can see from my incredibly artistic piece of paper, it's pretty awesome. You can be jelly. All right, so an antibody is just this. It looks like a Y. They float around in our body, and at the very ends here, you can see they have like little sticky dudes, right? I don't know if you can see that, but there's like little sticky parts at the end of these antibodies. And what is this there for? Well, these antibodies are, the incredible thing about them is they're so specific to one thing and one thing only. That's what's awesome about antibodies, is as they're floating around in our body, they're only specific for that particular bacteria or that particular virus or that particular toxin or whatever it may be, that they will only recognize one tiny little thing. They'll attack themselves or attach themselves to it, and then that bacteria can't infect the rest of the body. Pretty awesome, right? Okay, so how does that work? Let's say we have something floating around in our body, like an antibody, right? And how does all this work? Well, we have a lot of things going around in our body, right? In our blood cells or in our blood vessels, we have like all kinds of different things. We have some white blood cells, we have some platelets going on, we have some red blood cells coming in. Everybody's just kind of hanging out. They're all like, "What's up, bro? How's it going? Chilling, kicking it." You know, they're all just like grooving along. Nobody's like stressed out. Everything's cool. Well, sometimes we get exposed to these really gnarly things, like these bacteria, these viruses, all these things that are not good for us, right? That can make us sick, right? So we'll use this as an example, right? So this dude can represent like a bad bacteria, right? And this antibody that we're talking about just so happens that this antibody loves this little guy. Not anything else, not any other bacteria or virus, but this one in particular. So as this guy's floating through the blood vessel, he's trying to like hide with the red blood cells, and he's trying to like get to a tissue to where he can cause damage. The antibody sees him and he's like, "What? No, bro." He like attaches to him. What? When he attaches to him, he literally sticks to him just like this. And why is this so important? Because when he sticks to him like this, like I said, he can't go anywhere, right? Like imagine trying to hit that if you were like a baseball player. That would be horrible. Like, bro, where's this going to go? Like, nowhere, right? So when he sticks to him, this antibody can't do anything, or I'm sorry, this bacteria can't do anything because the antibody's stuck to him. Awesome, right? So now what do? Well, in the body, we now have the antibody that's attached to this bacteria floating around, kicking it, and he's like, "Yo, dude, I just got something bad. We need to get rid of him. What do we do from here?" Well, this antibody starts calling in his friends. He's like, yo, I need some help, bro. Who comes in? Some super awesome blood cells. What? This antibody goes to this guy. This big guy comes in. He starts digesting him. Boom. Antibody kicks back out. Bacteria is dead. Doesn't infect the body. Sweet. Pound it. Super sick, right? That's what we want in the body. We want to stay healthy with that, right? Awesome. So how do we get these little guys in our body, right? And we said that we have, this one is super specific to like that yellow ball bacteria. But what about like to a virus? Or what about to a different bacteria? And how do we get these little antibodies in our system? Well, there's two ways we can do it, right? Like I said, we have different antibodies for different things. This guy will bind to that yellow bacteria, but this guy just so happens that his jam is a lime. Yeah, a lime. That's what he binds to. He won't bind to the yellow bacteria or anything else, but he binds to limes. Not really limes, of course, I'm using them as examples. So we have these different types of antibodies, right? And there's thousands and thousands of them floating around in our system, right? For every kind of thing we can think of. So how do we get these? Two ways. When we get exposed to a bacteria, right? Like say that yellow ball that I just showed you. When we get exposed to that bacteria or that virus or that toxin or something that's bad, when we get exposed to that for the first time, what happens is our body is like, yo, this is super bad. This could cause a problem in the future, so let's make sure this doesn't happen, bro. So homeboy here, my little friend, there's a bunch of different cells in the body, and we can maybe make a video on it some other day on how exactly this works. But one of the things this guy does is he combines with some other cells, and he's like, okay, dude, we need to remember what's going on in the future, so if we ever get exposed to that bacteria again, we'll have something to fight it. Awesome. So we get exposed to this virus, right, or this bacteria or whatever. We get exposed to this, and then our body makes these antibodies, right? So then if we ever see it again, because it's so specific, we can defend ourselves from it and we don't get sick. Great, right? That's awesome. However, there's a little bit of a drawback. The little bit of a drawback is sometimes these antibodies can take up to 2 weeks to be made, right? Our body is super productive and we can do all these awesome things, but sometimes it takes up to 2 weeks to make these antibodies. What's the problem with that? Well, some of these bacteria are super horrible, right? Some of these bacteria can cause major problems and even death in much less time than in 2 weeks. In fact, some of them can cause serious illness and death within days. So what do we do with this? Why do we use this to our advantage, and what's the whole point of these antibodies and bacteria and all these things that I'm talking about? Well, because the topic of this video is vaccines, right? And how vaccines work. So a vaccine is really just a whole bunch of these antibodies, right? A whole bunch of these guys. Now, I mentioned before that these two dudes are different, right? This one is going to like your Lyme bacteria, okay? And this one is going to like the little yellow ball bacteria, right? Or viruses or toxins or whatever else we're talking about, right? But a vaccine is really just, think of it as a whole bunch of antibodies in the body or in this injection that we give someone. And it may not be an antibody specifically. It may be something like a chemical or a part of this bacteria that ultimately creates these antibodies. Because ultimately that's what we want, right? We ultimately want these antibodies to be made so that in the future, if we get exposed to this bacteria or toxin or whatever these bad things are, then we'll be good to go and we'll be safe from it. So that's what a vaccine is. It's very simple. It's just simply a whole bunch of things, whether it's antibodies or portions of bacteria or viruses or whatever else, that can ultimately create these antibodies in our body. Because when we give someone an injection, say like a tetanus injection, right? If I give someone a tetanus injection, am I giving them tetanus? No, not at all. In fact, what I'm giving is something that can create these tetanus antibodies. So God forbid you're walking along, like hanging out with your friends on a beach. I live here in Florida. Florida's awesome. We're always barefoot, right? Because it's always so warm. Well, you're walking along with your beach, having a good day walking along the beach, having a good day with your buddies, and all of a sudden, boom, step on a rusty nail from like 1846 because there's like some pirate dudes dug in with some gold, which I'm still looking for, by the way. So if you know any leads on gold, hit me up. So we step on that nail, and all of a sudden, we could potentially get tetanus. Horrible deal, right? Tetanus especially can go super quick throughout the body and cause major, major issues. We don't want that, right? So what do we do in the ER, right? Someone comes in, they step on a nail, they're like, oh, dude, I got this nail stuck in my foot, not cool. And we're like, okay, well, we're going to give you a tetanus shot, bro. And when we give someone a tetanus shot, we're literally giving them that reaction that they can create those tetanus antibodies. So the antibodies can float through the system, can go through the entire body, look for that tetanus bacteria, bind to it, get rid of it, and it's done, right? So it doesn't affect the body. That's what we're ultimately looking for, and that's the point of vaccines. All we're trying to do with vaccines is keep the body from being sick, right? And because it can take up to a few weeks for that to happen, vaccines allow us to basically give somebody the immunity from being sick without ever getting sick. Why is this so awesome? Think about babies. Think about people and young kids in daycare, all these kinds of things. People whose immune system isn't very strong, right? We can give them these vaccines to where all of a sudden their bodies can have this protection against an infection without ever getting it. Because some of these infections are so nasty that it can really damage the child or the adult or whomever, right? So that's why we want to give these vaccines, okay? So ultimately, I'm not going to talk at all about like MMR and autism and all those kinds of things, but that's because I know there's a lot of discrepancy and a lot of discussions on it and all that. But I wanted to simply talk about how vaccines work, what's the point of them, and then you can look on your own to determine your own personal thoughts and feelings and immunization schedules and all that kind of stuff. But please use this video as not as like a Bible or like the final word or anything like that, but use this as a start to a conversation with your pediatrician if you're interested in kids, with your family practice physician if you're interested in potentially getting vaccines for yourself or for your family members or loved ones. But ultimately, the whole point of vaccines, how they work, we have these awesome things called antibodies in our body that literally bind to bad bacteria, viruses, or whatever it is, and they go to keep us from getting sick. And we don't have to get sick in order to have these antibodies. We can give somebody something ahead of time so that they can already have that protection from it. And that is vaccines, and that is how they work. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and check it out next time when we will talk about something else. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about yet. All right. Thanks, guys.